Welcome back. Now that we've explored the individual mechanics of quantum key distribution, let's look at the big picture of BB84 post-processing. This is how we transform a messy stream of photons into a rock-solid, provably secure key. Phase 1 is all about information reconciliation. In the quantum world, we deal with two types of interference. First, there are natural sources of error, like thermal noise or laser misalignment, which can flip photon states during transmission. However, Jennifer and John must follow a strict security rule. They assume all errors are caused by an eavesdropper, whom we call Chris. To fix these errors without leaking the key, they perform parity search. By using binary searches and parity checks over a public channel, they can pinpoint and fix flipped bits until they are holding identical keys. But identical isn't the same as secure. If Chris was listening, he might have partial knowledge of that key. That brings us to Phase 2, privacy amplification. Think of this as a mathematical meat grinder. Jennifer and John run their corrected keys through a universal hashing function. This process triggers information evaporation. While it shrinks the total length of the key, it causes Chris's partial knowledge to vanish completely. The logic is absolute. If Chris misses even one original bit, he retains zero information about the final result. To summarize the pipeline, sifting discards mismatched bases to create a raw key. Error correction uses parity and binary searches to produce identical keys. Privacy amplification applies universal hashing to deliver the final secure secret key. And there you have it, the journey from light to a provably secure lock. Today, we are deep diving on another stage of the BB84 protocol. Once Jennifer and John have sifted their bases, they are left with a raw key, but it isn't ready for use yet. We now enter the post-processing pipeline to transform that noisy data into a provably secure secret key. Phase 1 is information reconciliation. During transmission, thermal noise and laser misalignment cause some photon states to flip. While these might be natural errors, Jennifer and John must adopt a high security posture and assume all errors are caused by an eavesdropper, whom we call Chris. To fix these discrepancies, they perform parity searches. By using binary searches and comparing parity checks, they can pinpoint and correct those flipped bits without revealing the actual values to Chris. The result of this stage is a set of identical keys. Even though their keys now match, Chris may still have gained partial knowledge earlier in the exchange. To eliminate this risk, we move to Phase 2, privacy amplification. Think of this as a mathematical meat grinder. Jennifer and John run their keys through a universal hash function. This triggers information evaporation. The process purposefully shrinks the length of the key, but it causes Chris's partial knowledge to vanish completely. If Chris misses even a single original bit, he is left with zero information about the final result. To recap the post-processing stages, sifting discards mismatched bases to create the raw key. Error correction uses parity and binary searches to achieve identical keys. Privacy amplification applies universal hashing to produce the final secure secret key. By following this pipeline, Jennifer and John move from a physics demonstration to a rock-solid cryptographic reality.
In our previous session, Jennifer successfully sent the quantum states, and she and John sifted their bases. At this point, it's easy to think the hard part is over, but that is the illusion of immediate perfection. While they have a foundation, the raw key Jennifer and John hold right now is, quite frankly, a mess. If you look at the bit stream, you'll see the problem. Amidst the valid data, there are errors, indicated here in red. These mismatches are unavoidable in the real world. Whether it's a 1 where there should be a 0 or a 0 where we expect a 1, these discrepancies mean the key is not yet ready for encryption. Before this key can be used, we have to clean it up. We need to identify every single one of those red errors and correct them without letting an eavesdropper see the values. This brings us to the critical work of post-processing. If you look at the image on your screen, you'll see a visual representation of what we call the quantum gap. On the left, we have the solid foundation of our key, the bits Jennifer and John successfully exchanged. But as you move toward the right, that structure begins to fracture into red, broken fragments. This is the hard truth of quantum physics. Even in a perfect laboratory environment, quantum communication is never 100% clean. The raw key Jennifer and John hold is not a ready-to-use password. Instead, it is riddled with environmental noise and the constant threat of potential interference. These gaps and broken segments represent the uncertainty that we must overcome. Whether it is a single misfired photon or a deliberate attempt by an eavesdropper to listen in, these imperfections create a bridge that we cannot cross without advanced mathematics. To turn this fragmented structure back into a solid, unbreakable tool, we have to move beyond the physics of light and into the logic of information. Let's look at how we begin to repair this gap through the post-processing pipeline.
To understand how we fix the key, we first have to understand what's breaking it. In the quantum realm, the primary enemy is environmental hostility. Even the most advanced fiber optic networks are subject to the laws of thermodynamics. On the left of your screen, you see the impact of thermal noise. This is ambient environmental heat. At a microscopic level, this energy can interact with a photon, actively flipping its quantum state. When that photon reaches John, it's no longer carrying the information Jennifer sent. On the right, we have alignment errors. This is a mechanical challenge. To maintain the integrity of the BB84 protocol, lasers and detectors must be perfectly synchronized. However, in practice, equipment can drift off by just a fraction of a degree. This tiny deviation is enough to cause detectors to misfire or misread the arriving data. Whether it's heat or a slight mechanical drift, the result is the same: errors in the bit stream. And as we discussed, in the interest of absolute security, we must treat every one of these environmental glitches as if it were a deliberate attempt by Chris to compromise the key. Now that we know why the raw key is a mess, let's look at the first step in cleaning it up: information reconciliation. While environmental noise is a constant challenge, we must also account for a more deliberate threat: the eavesdropper. In our scenario, we call this factor Chris. As you can see in the visual, the stable white line of our communication is violently disrupted by a jagged red spike. This represents Chris attempting to intercept the key. In classical computing, an eavesdropper can often copy data silently. But in the quantum realm, the laws of physics are on our side. Because of the no-cloning theorem, Chris cannot measure a photon without altering it. When he tries to pinch information out of the stream, he inevitably shatters the quantum state. This forced interaction doesn't just give him away, it actively injects even more errors and broken bits into the system, as shown by the collapsing structure on the right. This is why Jennifer and John have a zero-tolerance policy. Even if an error looks like simple thermal noise, they must treat it as if it were the Chris factor. Every discrepancy is a signal that the integrity of the key has been compromised. Now that we have identified both the environmental and human threats to our data, it's time to see how Jennifer and John fight back. Let's move into the actual mechanics of the parity search to see how they begin the repair process. As we have seen, the bit stream is under constant assault from both nature and potential adversaries. This leads Jennifer and John to a critical crossroads. When they find a flipped bit, they cannot truly know if that mistake is just harmless thermal noise or if it is the footprint of Chris. In quantum cryptography, uncertainty is a luxury we cannot afford.
Because they cannot distinguish between the two, Jennifer and John follow the ultimate security mandate: assume the worst. They treat every single discrepancy as a sign of intrusion. To resolve this, they trigger a rigorous diagnostic purge known as information reconciliation. This isn't just a simple search and replace function. It is a mathematical process designed to scrub the key of errors while revealing as little information as possible to the outside world. By assuming the worst, they ensure the highest possible level of security. Now, let's look at the specific engine they use to perform this purge: the parity search. We have now reached one of the most elegant paradoxes in quantum security. Jennifer and John have to fix the errors in their key, but they have to do it over a public channel where anyone, including Chris, can listen. How do you fix a secret without telling the world what that secret is? The answer lies in the lock you see on your screen: parity and XOR logic. Instead of revealing individual bits, Jennifer and John use a mathematical operation called exclusive OR, or XOR. This allows them to summarize an entire block of data into a single value, the parity. By simply sharing whether a block has an even or odd number of ones, Jennifer and John can determine if their data matches. If Jennifer's parity is even and John's is odd, they know an error exists. The beauty of this logic is that knowing the parity tells an eavesdropper almost nothing about the actual bits. Chris might hear the word even, but he has no way of knowing if that means 00, 11, or any other combination. This mathematical shield is the engine of information reconciliation. Now, let's see how Jennifer and John use this parity logic to go on the offensive and hunt down specific errors using the binary search method.
Now let's see this logic in action. To begin the cleanup, Jennifer takes her shared raw key and divides it into manageable segments. In this example, she is looking at a 10-bit block. Instead of sending John the actual sequence of ones and zeros, she asks one simple mathematical question: is the sum of my ones even or odd? This is the essence of calculating parity. As you can see in the diagram, Jennifer sums up the bits in her block. For this specific set, the total is 6, an even number. She then broadcasts this single word, even, over a public channel for John to hear. By doing this, she has provided a summary of her data without revealing the data itself. To anyone listening, like Chris, the word even provides no clues as to where the ones and zeros are actually located. It's a summary that protects the secret while setting the stage for the comparison. Now the ball is in John's court. He must perform the same calculation on his end to see if their blocks are in sync. Let's see what happens when the answers don't match.
Once Jennifer broadcasts her parity summary, John performs the exact same calculation on his block. This is the moment of truth. If their results are identical, the block is likely clean. But as you can see in the graphic, we often encounter a mismatch. If Jennifer says even and John's block calculates to odd, we have definitive mathematical proof that something is wrong. There is at least one flipped bit, an error, hiding somewhere inside that block of 10. Now, the logical next step might seem to be just reading the bits out loud to see which one is different, but we must remember the Chris factor. Jennifer and John are communicating over a public channel. If they read the bits out loud, they are essentially handing the secret key directly to Chris. They are caught in a bind. They must fix the error to have matching keys, but they cannot reveal the bits to do it. To solve this, they move from simple comparison to a more surgical approach. Let's look at how they use a binary search to hunt down the error while keeping the data hidden in plain sight. Once Jennifer and John realize their block has a parity mismatch, they are faced with a needle in a haystack problem. How do they find the specific bit that is wrong without revealing the whole string? The answer is a classic computational strategy, the binary search. The process begins with the split. As you can see in the graphic, Jennifer and John take their 10-bit block and cut it cleanly in half. Instead of trying to analyze all 10 bits at once, they isolate the problem into two smaller 5-bit segments. By dividing the block, they can now apply the parity test to just one side. If the parity of the first 5 bits matches, they know with mathematical certainty that those 5 bits are clean, and the error must be in the second half. If they don't match, they've already narrowed the search area by 50%. This divide and conquer method is incredibly efficient. It allows them to zoom in on the error with surgical precision while continuing to keep the actual bit values hidden from any observers. Now that the block is split, let's see how they use this new, smaller segment to close in on the target.
With the block now split, Jennifer and John move into the active phase of the hunt, the check. Instead of guessing where the error might be, they apply their parity logic to the first half of the split. As you see in the graphic, they calculate the sum of the first 5 bits. They share this specific parity result over the public channel. If the parities of these first 5 bits match, it's good news. It means this entire segment is clean. By process of elimination, the error must be hiding in the remaining 5 bits. If the parities of this first segment don't match, they have successfully trapped the error in a much smaller area. This binary approach allows them to discard half of the data with every single check, rapidly zeroing in on the flipped bit without ever having to look at the bits themselves. This constant cycle of splitting and checking is what makes the BB84 Post-Processing Pipeline so robust. Now let's see the final result of this search, the pinpoint correction that brings both keys into perfect alignment. Now we reach the most efficient phase of our search, the narrow. Once Jennifer and John have performed their parity check on the first half of the block, they can act with total mathematical certainty. As shown in the graphic, if the parity for that first 5-bit segment matches perfectly, they don't need to investigate it any further. They effectively delete that half from their search area. This means the error is now trapped in the second 5-bit block, highlighted here in red. By narrowing the field of play, they significantly reduce the complexity of the problem. They will now take this remaining 5-bit block and repeat the process, split it again, check the parity again, and narrow it down once more. With every narrowing step, they get closer to the flipped bit, while only ever revealing a single binary parity answer. Chris is left watching a process he cannot decode, while Jennifer and John close in on their target. We have narrowed the search to just 5 bits. Let's move to the final stage of the hunt, pinpointing the exact bit and executing the kill. We have reached the end game of the error correction process, the kill. After a series of rapid splits and parity checks, Jennifer and John have successfully zoomed in through the noise. They have narrowed the search area down from a large block to the single specific bit that caused the mismatch. As you can see in the graphic, the target is identified. Since Jennifer's key is the reference, John performs a simple but powerful action. He flips that one incorrect bit. A 0 becomes a 1, or a 1 becomes a 0. With that single stroke, the mathematical tension is resolved. The result is total synchronization. For the first time in the protocol, Jennifer and John are holding keys that match perfectly, bit for bit. They have successfully reconciled their information, transforming a messy raw key into a pair of identical keys. However, a major hurdle remains. While their keys are now identical, they are not yet fully secure. Because this reconciliation happened over a public channel, we must assume Chris was taking notes. Even a tiny bit of leaked information is too much for quantum-grade security.
To finish the job and achieve perfect secrecy, we must now move to the final stage of the pipeline, privacy amplification. Let's look at how we use hashing to evaporate Chris's knowledge once and for all.
At this stage, it's tempting to think the mission is complete. Jennifer and John have successfully fixed every error and are now holding identical bit streams. But in the world of quantum cryptography, a matching key is not necessarily a secret one. We are now facing the lingering threat. While Jennifer and John were busy reconciling their information, they were doing so over a public channel. This means Chris was listening to every single parity conversation. Furthermore, we must assume Chris intercepted some of the original photons before the sifting process even began. As you can see in the graphic, the key is still leaking. Chris possesses what we call partial knowledge. He doesn't have the whole key, but he might know enough, perhaps 10% or even just a few critical bits, to compromise the entire encryption later on. In a provably secure system, even a single bit of leaked information is a failure. We cannot use this key as it stands. We need one final aggressive purge to turn Chris's partial knowledge into absolute zero. To achieve this, we move to the final phase of our pipeline. Let's look at how we use the mathematical meat grinder of privacy amplification to finish the job. We have reached the final stage of the BB84 Post-Processing Pipeline, privacy amplification. Think of this as the heavy machinery of our security system, the final cryptographic shield designed to render any partial knowledge held by Chris completely useless. As you see in the mechanical gears on your screen, this process is about fundamental transformation. Jennifer and John take their long, identical, but potentially slightly compromised keys and run them through a powerful mathematical meat grinder known as a universal hash function. This isn't just a simple encryption step, it is a compression that triggers information evaporation. While the resulting key is shorter than the original, its security is exponentially higher. The beauty of hashing logic is that if Chris is missing even a single bit of the original key, he is left with absolutely zero knowledge of the final result. The gears of privacy amplification grind down the uncertainty until only perfect secrecy remains. Jennifer and John are no longer holding a messy raw key. They are holding a provably secure secret key that is ready for the most sensitive real-world applications. By combining physics with this high-level mathematical logic, we have bridged the gap from light to an unbreakable lock. To understand how we achieve perfect secrecy, we have to look inside the mechanism of the universal hash function. As you can see in the graphic, Jennifer and John take their long, identical, but slightly compromised key and feed it into what is effectively a mathematical grinder. This isn't just about mixing up the bits. This function performs a massive compression. By mapping the long bit stream into a much shorter string, we are fundamentally changing the nature of the data. This leads to the most critical effect in the entire pipeline, information evaporation. Because the output is shorter and mathematically dense, any tiny fragment of knowledge that Chris might have held, like the parity of a specific block or the value of a single intercepted photon, becomes completely disconnected from the final result. If Chris doesn't have the entire original key with 100% accuracy, the hash function ensures he has zero mathematical predictability over the output. The result that emerges from the grinder is the secure secret key, a concentrated, unbreakable string of data. With the hash complete, the transformation is total. Jennifer and John have moved from vulnerable pulses of light to a key that is provably secure against even the most powerful eavesdropper. We have reached the ultimate goal of the post-processing pipeline: total evaporation. As the universal hash function completes its work, we witness a phenomenon that is unique to quantum-secured communication.
As you see in the graphic, the long bit stream has been compressed into a shorter, high-density key. But look at what is happening to the red fragments on the right. These represent the partial knowledge held by Chris. Because of the mathematical properties of the hash, that knowledge is not just obscured, it is physically and mathematically severed from the final result. The logic is absolute. If Chris is missing even a single bit of the original, uncorrected key, his ability to predict the new, shorter key drops to zero. His partial information evaporates into nothingness. He is left with a pile of digital dust, while Jennifer and John hold a key that is perfectly clean. What remains is the provably secure result. This final key is shorter than the one we started with, but it is exponentially more powerful. It is a tool forged in the laws of physics and refined by the logic of mathematics. Jennifer and John have successfully navigated the path to perfect secrecy. Let's take one final look at the entire pipeline to see how these individual steps create a single, unbreakable shield.
We have reached the end of the line. What you see here is the complete BB84 Post-Processing Pipeline, the essential journey from vulnerable pulses of light to unbreakable, secure logic. It all begins with sifting. By discarding the bits where Jennifer and John used mismatched bases, we establish our first foundation, the raw key. Next, we move to error correction. Through the surgical application of parity checks and binary searches, we hunt down every flipped bit caused by environmental noise or the interference of Chris. Once the last bit is flipped, Jennifer and John are left with identical keys. Finally, we execute privacy amplification. By running those identical keys through a universal hash function, we trigger total information evaporation. This process crushes any partial knowledge held by an eavesdropper, leaving us with the ultimate result, a concentrated, secure secret key. This pipeline is what transforms quantum mechanics from a laboratory curiosity into a rock-solid cryptographic reality. Jennifer and John now share a secret that is protected not just by a password, but by the fundamental laws of the universe.
We have reached the end of our deep dive into the BB84 Post-Processing Pipeline. To truly appreciate how we move from physics to cryptography, let's recap the 3 steps to secrecy. First, we have sifting. This is our initial cleanup where Jennifer and John compare their measurement bases. By discarding every bit where their bases didn't match, they distill their messy quantum data into a shared raw key. Next, we move to error correction. Because real-world channels are noisy and eavesdroppers like Chris are a constant threat, Jennifer and John utilize parity checks and binary search logic. This allows them to hunt down and fix discrepancies over a public channel without giving away the secret, ultimately forcing their bit streams to become identical keys. Finally, we apply the ultimate cryptographic shield, privacy amplification. By deploying universal hashing, we trigger total information evaporation. This step is non-negotiable. It crushes any intercepted information Chris might have gained into absolute nothingness. Through these 3 steps, we transform vulnerable light into secure logic. Jennifer and John now share a secure secret key that is provably protected by the fundamental laws of the universe.
We have reached our destination. As you see the solid blue key on your screen, you are looking at the ultimate achievement of quantum information theory. We have moved from a fragile physics experiment subject to noise, drift, and eavesdropping to a rock-solid cryptographic protocol. Unlike classical encryption, which relies on the mathematical difficulty of factoring large numbers, this result is provably secure. This means its safety is not a matter of computational power or clever algorithms. It is guaranteed by the fundamental laws of physics themselves. The journey is complete.
Through the rigorous pipeline of sifting, error correction, and privacy amplification, Jennifer and John have successfully extracted a provably secure secret key. This is a tool that can be used to protect the most sensitive data in the world with absolute certainty. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the BB84 Post-Processing Pipeline. You now understand the machinery that turns light into an unbreakable shield. For more insights into the future of cybersecurity, visit us at AI Quantum Secure. I'm your AI Quantum Architect, and I'll see you in the next frontier.